Okay, here too. So at this point, you should have completed your underpainting. So my underpainting was 3 different shades of yellow, and the entire canvas is painted in those 3 shades, but I've painted inside individual shapes so that I could still see my outline. Also at this point, you'll see like most of my charcoal is gone. If you still have charcoal remaining, that's okay, but the goal is not to be able to see charcoal by the end of your finished painting. That charcoal is meant to kind of disappear and go away, and that's why we use it. So for your overpainting, that's essentially going to just be the color scheme that you want the final piece to be. So you're referencing your paint chip. This paint chip color is, the color scheme from your paint chip is meant to be the full reference, but it's okay if you have to kind of deviate a little bit. When I say that, and obviously I've started here, but like this is getting darker than my actual color here. I'm also starting to add a little bit lighter spots than my lightest color here, and that's just going to help increase the depth of my painting, make it look more three-dimensional, so that I can kind of meet that trompe l'oeil requirement. So far in my painting, I have 1 layer of purple in my background and on my border. You can see it's still really translucent and see-through. Here on this cone, I have about 2 coats of acrylic paint. I have 1 coat here and 1 coat here. And you can still see, even with 2 coats, I can still see some of that yellow coming through. But it's great because it's not the pure white of the canvas, so it's actually working with my painting and making my life a little bit easier. So I'm going to show you, I'm going to paint one of my yellow forms so you can kind of just see how the first layer is supposed to go on. And then I'm going to return to my second and third layers here to review the wet on dry blending technique. Okay, so I have my purples here. I recommend kind of doing some pre-mixing just so that you're not constantly having to stop. Remember, acrylic paint kind of dries up quickly. So you want to make sure that you are not working like super fast, but you want to, make your colors accessible so that while you're painting, your color isn't drying too quickly before you can actually do any blending. So for my first coat of purple here, I am just, I'm kind of following that wet on wet technique, but I'm okay if things kind of start to dry because I know how to do my wet on dry blending. So kind of just placing my purples. Wherever there was a medium yellow, I'm putting a medium purple. Wherever there was a light yellow, I'm putting a light purple. And then wherever I had my darkest shade of yellow, that is where my darkest shade of purple is going to go. I'm still kind of using my bigger angled brush. So a stronger, or not stronger, but a straighter edged brush is great for my shapes because I have straight edges that I have to keep really precise and clean. Also, my goal is to kind of completely cover up my yellow. It's okay some of the yellow comes through, but I don't want to leave any pure yellow on my canvas. So I'm just kind of pushing my paint to the edge, not painting to the outline, but painting over the outline. And again, doing a little bit of blending just right on my canvas at first. This first layer, again, it's going to be rough. You're just, again, still establishing color. And I'm going to have to let this dry before I can really start getting detailed with my blending. So this is how I would paint my first layer. All right, it's still, my dark isn't as dark as I'm going to want it to be. I'm going to wait for my second layer for that. And it's almost like kind of the same color as my background here. So that's just the first layer and kind of a quick placement of highlight, midtones, and shadows. All right, so let's drop down to the bottom cone here. So this is one that has had 2 layers already. So I'm going to switch to a smaller brush. And this brush is going to allow me to be a little bit more detailed. Now this time, it's helpful to look at a reference photo. And that should be the one that you've made in Pixlr, just to make sure that you are rendering these as accurately as possible. So I'm going to kind of focus on my highlights here. I'm going to also focus on my midtones and just kind of build this up in a little bit smoother area. So on my paint palette, I have some white. I'm going to mix in some purple. And again, this is dry, so I'm going to kind of treat this as like a wet on dry technique. So where I am placing the highlight where I want it, and you can kind of see like there's a little bit of a drying effect here. I'm going to see if I can zoom in. There we go. So the dry brush technique here, you can kind of see that it's showing the texture of the canvas, and that is perfect. That's exactly what you want for that dry technique. I'm just going to kind of place a little bit more of a highlight there, kind of bring that purple back. I don't want it to be pure white because then, you know, I just covered up a white canvas. Why would I want pure white? But getting some of that white purple. So whatever color scheme you have, it might be nice for you to have, it's like pretty much white paint, but it has like a tint of whatever color your paint chip is. So I'm just kind of like gently blending while that's wet, but then not being afraid. And then I'm just going to dry off my brush and then just kind of get a little dry brush action all the way through. Start to kind of create that nice blend. Dry off the extra brush a little bit. Now if I overdo it, which I think I've overdid it right here, I can come back with my mid-tone purple and just paint right on over it. Alright, so I'm going to kind of pull that, pushing it into the canvas gently. Your direction of your brush strokes matter. You know, if you want your shape to look round, you should use round brush strokes. If you want it to look straight, you should use straight brush strokes. So just kind of keep that in mind with whatever shape you're working on. As you're working, I recommend kind of working in zones. So while my first layer right here is drying, I'm able to kind of really perfect this one cone right here. And I would consider this, you know, hey, I'm starting my third layer of this part of the painting. To kind of do everything like, okay, one coat's done, two coats done. I find for me, it stresses me out because it's like I'm racing against time as things start to dry. But it's kind of nice to kind of have them at different stages at this point, because I can kind of be general here and then I can kind of figure out my technique here. All right, that got a little dark on me, so I'm going to kind of pull this back, lighten this up. Ooh, I kind of like that cross highlight, so I'm gonna have that blend out a little bit. Okay, kind of gently pushing that in, kind of getting more into a purple tone because my white and my blacks are working together. All right, and I'm trying to keep this pretty linear, I think. So let me get some of that pre-mixed stuff. Here we go. There we go. All right. Blend this out as I talk to myself. All right, so I'm going to kind of zoom in. I don't know if you can kind of see that texture, that kind of like brush stroke texture where you can see the texture of the canvas right here. And that's that wet on dry brush blending technique. Now, I'm going to show you another one, and I'm going to show it to you down here in the shadow area with the matte medium. Okay, so the matte medium is, here it is, matte medium. This is just something you add to your color. It can act as an extender, but what it also does is it makes the paint a little bit more translucent. You might be thinking like, why in the world would I want to do that? You might want to do that if you're adding like a highlight or a shadow, but you want the underpainting to kind of show through. And when I say underpainting, maybe a darker layer, or I mean, I can even put it here. See how see-through that is? You can like, well, hold on. Here you go. See how see-through that is? Like it's almost like barely purple. That's the matte medium. But when I put it on here over top of an already purple that's already established, it kind of already does a lot of the blending for you, because it's not like a completely different color, because it's actually using some of the colors that are already underneath it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use it for the shadow area to kind of help fade the shadow into the rest of the cone. So I'm going to get some purple with a little bit of black. I'm using black to darken my purple, but depending on your paint chip, you might be using blue or green or even purple to darken your color. It just depends on whatever paint chip you have. And I am like mixing a bunch of this matte medium into the color. It should not change the color. If it does, it lightens it only slightly. But what it's going to do is it's going to make it a little bit more see-through. So what I'm going to do is start kind of layering this in where my shadow is, and it should look dark here. But then as I kind of like blend and fade, it's not super overpowering. I can use a little bit more matte medium. There we go. And it kind of creates like a gradual fade from dark to light, as shadows often do. And it's utilizing the color that I've already placed underneath, which was that like nice like medium purple. I'm going to switch to a little bit of a larger brush. All right. Take my matte medium mixed color and just kind of pull that in. So this is mixing wet on dry, but do you remember when we did the loaded brush one where on the value scale you got to add water to make it fade? This is the same thing, except we're using a medium to make it fade. And again, it's kind of letting the whatever's underneath it show through. And the cool thing about it is it's like if I need to correct while it's wet, it still kind of cooperates and lets me kind of do the wet on wet blending technique. There we go. And acts more like a paint medium. When you water down your paint, it kind of breaks down the integrity of the paint. So it definitely makes the paint underneath more likely to lift off your canvas, even if it's dry. Water can be dangerous. So matte medium is a really great tool that kind of protects your underlayer. I also really like to use my hands when I paint. So if you see that, you're welcome to try it. It's not, you know, a formal technique, but it happens sometimes. If you've ever followed like an artist on social media or seen an artist work, sometimes you'll see that they're wearing gloves because they often use their hands to kind of press the paint in or blend, and I kind of have that habit sometimes too. Okay, so that's creating kind of a more like a moody, dramatic shadow, and I like that because it's going to make it seem like this is really in front of this. So when I add another layer of paint here, it's going to really pop out. Now, one thing that I did do here was I accidentally overpainted. That's not a big deal because I can just correct it by painting a clean edge over top. Yeah, it's dry enough. I was going to say make sure that it's dry before you do this, but it seems to be working okay. There we go. There we go. And I have a little matte medium on my brush still. That's why it looks kind of watery, but it's not water. It's matte medium. All right. So I'm going to continue working on a few of these, and so you can kind of just see how the process goes and how I kind of jump around. But at this point, you're kind of switching off between like the dry brush and the wet on wet using matte medium, which I will have for you in class. Thanks.